Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Bitter, and I want to welcome everyone to this episode of the show. As a way to thank the listeners for helping me grow this podcast over the years, I'm going to continue a raffle option for all of you to have a chance to win a free consultation with me. So it's a 30-minute consultation that I will raffle off once per month. All you have to do to enter is share the episodes that you enjoy on whatever platform you find most interesting. The only thing I ask you to do is, if it's a social media channel, make sure you tag me so I see it and can save that and enter in the raffle. Or if it's somewhere else that you can't tag me at, take a screenshot and send that to me at hpopodcast@gmail.com. You can also enter the raffle by writing a show review on your favorite podcast listening platform. So if you do that, take the screenshot, send it to hpopodcast@gmail.com, and I will enter you in that monthly raffle. Also, I'm excited to announce that I launched a new group coaching option. So to go along with my personalized one-on-one coaching options and my pre-made plans that I have on my website at zachbitter.com, this year I'm starting a group of online endurance runners who want to work with me in a slightly different model. So this model is set up so that whether you're a beginner or advanced, you can join. Whether you're training for something like a 5K or something as far as a 200 plus miler, you are welcome, and this setup will help you reach your goals. The way I have it set up is, if you subscribe, you will have access to my full catalog of training plans, which range from beginner 5K all the way up to advanced 200 plus miles. Along with that plan that you're going to use, you will have access to a weekly group meeting where you can ask questions about training. You can ask about adjustments to the plan to make it more personalized to you. You can engage with the other group members if you want. We'll get you all set up and ready to really personalize that plan to make sure that you're heading in the right direction for your event. Also, you will have access to office hours, where if you have something you want to ask and you want to just hop in and ask a question, you'll be given access to that as well. I will be bringing in guest speakers who have a deep understanding of specific topics and things that we'll use to better your training and recovery process throughout the course of the year, as well as a private forum for all the members to engage with one another, share stories, share training tips, and just house a lot of the information that we'll go over on the daily and weekly basis as you're pursuing your race goals. So if you're interested in checking that out, just head to my website at zachbitter.com, go to the coaching tab. From there, you'll be directed to the team coaching option, and you can sign up for that and get onboarded to join the group. If you're interested in keeping up with what I'm up to, please give me a follow on some of my socials. Follow me on Instagram at ZachBitter, on X, Twitter at ZBitter, and check out the brand new HPO podcast handles, which are just at HPO Podcast on Instagram and X/Twitter. Of course, all this stuff can be found quite easily on my website, which is the main landing page for everything I do at zachbitter.com. All right. Well, Mike, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking some time to come chat with me.
Absolutely, Zach. So stoked to be here and talk about some of the glory days for Team Red, White, and Blue and some of the exciting things you got on the horizon. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no, we go way back. We basically go back to the beginning of my ultra running career, I think. I remember, I want to say it was in 2011, I did the JFK 50 mile for the first time, and you sent me and I think David Riddle maybe an email saying, "Hey, we saw you guys." I mean, I think David won JFK that year, maybe broke the course record even. And you were just like, "Hey, I've got this project I'm working on called Team Red, White, and Blue, and we're looking to kind of use endurance sports as a way to kind of give veterans returning from like Iraq, Afghanistan, an outlet to kind of reintroduce themselves into kind of civilian society." And remember thinking, well, that's a great idea, because you kind of have this like really productive activity. I think generally speaking, the running community is a pretty welcoming space. So it seemed like, yeah, that's a great idea to kind of give these guys and gals an outlet to kind of reintegrate. And so I was all in on it. I ran my first Desert Solstice track invitational with Team Red, White, and Blue
Yep, I
singlet on.
remember that.
Yeah. So it was kind of fun to kind of hear the idea and see it kind of take off, because I mean, Team RWB's gotten massive since then. I think you've had partnerships with like the NFL, NASCAR, and much bigger organizations than ultra running. So
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about how things evolve. You come up with an idea, and then how over time different people pour into that and they shape and influence it. But yeah, you're exactly right. I started it in 2010. I was at the 2011 JFK 50 miler. We actually had a bunch of us, probably 35 or 40 veterans came to run that race. And I remember just seeing how fast you ran it. And that was back in the day when, people didn't get 1,000,001 solicitation emails or 1,000,000 people, reaching out on social media. So you probably didn't hear from very many people back then. The world was so different. And I remember reaching out being like, hey, this is a bit of a long shot, but would you just be willing to like wear our shirt and like, just tell people that you support the military and veteran community as they take off the uniform and become civilians? And you're like, yeah, man, sounds good. And so the world of sponsorship and everything has just evolved so much in the past decade. But I tell people frequently about how important people like you and David Riddle and Dom Grossman and Liza Howard, Mike Morton, they were to the credibility of the organization early on, because the first couple of years you create an organization, I don't care how great the idea is, you are going to be in a fight for legitimacy. Like, is this legit? Mm-hmm. And when people who are out there doing really well in whatever the discipline or the vertical might be, like, it adds a ton of credibility when they are willing to put their name behind it. And so you and many others doing that was really instrumental in helping the organization get off the ground and set the stage for us to grow into what we've become.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool story, and I think like it's probably worth going back a little bit further and just chatting a little bit about kind of your introduction into the military, and then through that experience, like maybe the idea of like an organization like Team RWB. So I guess the question is like, what got you interested in the first place to join the services?
Yeah, so I come from a big servant family. So teachers, nurses, firefighters, police officers, people who, a lot of them are public servants. But I never really thought about going into the military. I didn't have anyone like in my immediate family that, had been in the military. And one day at the end of my sophomore year, my mom came home from work and she was like, hey, you ever thought about going to West Point? And I was like, no, not really. But, at the time, the big Army commercials were be all you can be. And I thought those were pretty cool. And so yeah, we went down and visited it, and it was just incredible. I mean, a beautiful place, so much history and tradition, and it was just a challenging place. And I saw that in my 4-hour visit there. And I left Zach being like, well, I've got to at least give this a shot. I've got to try to get in here, because if not, I'll always wonder what if. And that really changed not just the future of my life, but really my entire family. I mean, my brother ended up going to West Point and going into the Army. Both of my sisters married West Point graduates. And so like the entire, shape of the Erwin family, has been influenced by that. And that's one of those crazy things that when sometimes one decision by one person has this ripple effect that it takes a couple of decades to see how that really fully plays out. But yeah, I mean, I graduated into a time of war. So my senior year is when 9/11 took place. And so I, graduated, and it was like, all right, you guys are gonna be going to Iraq or Afghanistan pretty quickly. And so, things got really serious really quick at West Point, after 9/11. And then I went on to serve a total of 13 years in the active duty. I was an intelligence officer. So my job was to look at all the various forms of intelligence: imagery intelligence, signals intelligence, human intelligence, open source intelligence, and to assess validities and to try to make sense of all them, with the goal to be able to forecast what the Taliban, what Al-Qaeda in Iraq, what the insurgents were going to do next, and to tell people in my unit, soldiers in my unit, this is what I think is going to happen, right? So that was my job, on and off for that 7 to 8 year period between 2002 and 2009, when I deployed 3 times, once to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan, and that's really what set the table for me then to found Team Red, White, and Blue because after my third deployment, I went to grad school at the University of Michigan. I studied positive psychology and leadership. And that's really where the idea sort of came to me that, hey, when you're in the military, you have to exercise, you have to work out. And then you leave the military, whether you want to, or whether you're medically retired, or whether you've been in for 3 years or 35 years, at some point, your military service ends, and that requirement to be physically active also ends. And so we just realized in having conversations with lots of fellow service members and fellow veterans that we almost all couldn't believe that a nonprofit like Team Red, White, and Blue did not already exist. Like, how has no one created an organization with the goal to keep service members as they become veterans physically active, right? And then the second part of that was when we formed the organization, the lawyers were like, there's no way that the name Team Red, White, and Blue is not taken. They're like, someone's got to have that name. And sure enough, they came back like an hour later. They're like, sure enough, you're not going to believe this, but the name Team Red, White, and Blue is not taken by anyone. I'm like, well, let's get on that as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those things there really kind of just come together to explain the founding part of the organization in 2010 and 2011 when I was in grad school and when the organization was so young and none of us knew what we were doing. We just all knew that we wanted to support and to make a difference and help veterans to be as healthy as they possibly could from the time that they leave the military for the rest of their lives, which could be 30, 40, 50, 55 years for a lot of them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because it makes sense. I think like when you think about it, where you sort of have like a semi-similar scenario occur when like, you graduate from high school, you graduate from college, where you kind of have that structure removed from your life that was maybe offering an input. Maybe this is more of a historic input. Maybe that's not happening as much anymore. But like, when you're in school, you kind of have that structure there, and there's going to be a physical education component. There's going to be extracurricular sports components where you kind of just show up and you're going to get put through the fitness paces, essentially through gamification of it. And then you graduate and you go out into the real world, and it's just like there's stuff there, but there's a little more friction, I think, in terms of accessing it. And then depending on what your sport was in high school, college, or what you preferred in PE, or if you go far enough back, recess, it's like it might be harder or easier to find that publicly available. So I guess the hope is that at that point you're kind of surrounded by people who are active and can kind of welcome you into whatever structures are there. But when I think of like a service member returning, you're kind of like removed. I would imagine like coming back, you sort of feel like your life was on pause, but everyone else's was moving forward. So you're kind of in an awkward situation to begin with. So then priorities may not line up to where you're thinking, okay, I need to maintain this fitness regime that was kind of set up for me before.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we see a lot with like service members when they come back? Is it like harder for them to find spots, or is it the structure? Is it the priorities of other things for them feeling that they have to catch up with the rest of society, or some combination of all
Yeah, I
that?
think it's probably a combination of it. I think about a couple of things. First of all, in recent years, this is like the first time in American history since they've been tracking this that veterans are less healthy on average than non-veterans in America. And so that's a challenge, right? Because typically veterans were more healthy because you exercise and that became a part of your life and a part of your routine. But I think that the transition from service member to civilian has become psychologically more difficult in the past 15, 20 years, since Iraq and Afghanistan and the response to 9/11 than it was in previous years. So many of the folks that left the military, in 03, 07, 10, right? A lot of them had multiple deployments under their belts over a multi-year period of like 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 years. But I think that part of it is also tied to the fact that there's not necessarily a very positive association with physical activity when you're in the military, right? We do it typically at 6:30 in the morning when you're in. You do kind of mandatory calisthenics and running. So there's not a lot of opportunity to personalize your fitness. So, hey, you might love running, but at the end of the day, you're still doing a lot of push-ups, burpees,
Yeah.
sit-ups, and then maybe you go on a 3-mile run, and so there's not necessarily the chance to do very much personalization. And so a lot of times veterans associate exercise with waking up really early and doing something that they don't want to do. And also, fitness is also a punishment in the military when
Yeah.
you're misbehaved. And so all those things kind of come together, I think, to make it so that when veterans leave, especially for the dudes, like they stop shaving and they grow their hair out, are typically the two things that male veterans do, right? And then, we just see veterans across the board no longer have to wake up early into exercise. And so they say, oh, well, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. And that's not all. Certainly some veterans still maintain that early morning wake up, that early morning run in fitness. But a lot of them do not. And my message and our message at Team Red, White, and Blue, Zach, a big one is that, number one, if you hate burpees or hate push-ups or hate running, like find something that you love, right? Find CrossFit, find Pilates, find hiking, whatever it might be. Find something that you do enjoy. And number two, you don't have to do it at 6:30 in the morning. If you're
Right.
not a
Yeah.
morning person, like, hey, especially like when it's cold out, like go in the middle of the day, take a lunch break, or go in the afternoon. You don't have to go do it, at the time that makes it be associated with being tired, which is what a lot of soldiers feel when they wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to PT formation by 6:15.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there like a type of exercise that you find that some of the returning service members gravitate towards? Is it a logistics thing where it's like what they have access to, or do they tend to gravitate towards certain types of
I think a
stuff?
lot of times you see a lot of them younger, right? So they focus a lot on weightlifting, and that kind of stuff. So a lot will often go into CrossFit. But what's really interesting, especially when you look at a lot of the elite units, what you see a lot of elite units, like there's a big focus on running, and I also see this right now happening. I'd be curious to get your take on this. If you see this happening writ large across like America or the world, but we're starting to see it from the military and veteran population. There seems to be like a rise again in the focus on running. There was a big focus on running
Mhm.
that I saw in Team RDB in 2010 to 2013 or 14. And then, we used to say at Team RDB, hey, we don't just run, like we do other things. But that was also kind of in parallel with like a surge in other fitness activities that we saw popping up. But it seems to be that when I go to big cities, I'll see like a run group of like 60 or 70 people on a random Tuesday night. It seems to be that running is making a bit of a comeback in that regard. So yeah, I would love to hear if that's consistent with what you've seen, or maybe it's never. I know for you it hasn't left personally, but what have you observed, like not just in Austin, but more broadly across the country?
Here are some discounts and promos for the HPO sponsors. Delta G Ketones has 20% off with BITTER20 promo code, and they also offer free consultations to help you assess how their product would best fit your lifestyles. Head to deltagketones.com. Element Electrolytes has a free sample pack with purchase and a satisfaction guarantee, meaning if you don't like it, they will give you your money back, no questions asked, and you don't even have to return the box. Go to drinklmnt.com/HPO to get that free sample pack and try out all their flavors with your purchase. John G Apparel has 10% off with promo code BITTER10. Check out their AFO shorts if you're in the market for a new pair of running or gym shorts. That's johng.com, JANJI.com. S Fuels has a 15% site-wide discount. Go to sfuelsgolonger.com. All links, promos, and discounts can be found in the show notes as well as every episode landing page. Yeah, I've definitely seen an uptick in running in general. I think it's kind of probably multifaceted. I think there was a big catalyst with the pandemic where you'd have a scenario where some people just got motivated to exercise because there was a lot of rhetoric around kind of health and how that would amplify your chances of not being compromised as much with, just getting
Yep.
sick. I mean, some people went the opposite direction,
Right.
obviously, too, but it almost seemed kind of like polarizing where no one kind of just stayed the same. They either like completely fell off
Yeah.
and then or went all in and decided, okay, this is where I'm going to kind of really turn my health around. And running is such an accessible
Yes.
sport in people's minds. And it can be something where if you have the right kind of entry points to it, you can really just kind of start at your own
Right.
pace. It's not like, oh, I want to play basketball. I need to find a team or a league. And then you do. And it's like, oh, these guys are all way better than me. Now I'm just kind of like out above in the deep end, so to speak. And then you also saw people that were already fitness minded, but like lost access to the gym,
Hmm.
lost access to team sports, lost access to big CrossFit
Good
gym
point.
type stuff. Although I think the CrossFit gyms probably tried to stay open a little bit more than average. But it's like, yeah, I think we saw a huge growth into that. And then I think this also kind of phased into just the way people are starting to consume media.
Hmm.
So you'd have people either on like Instagram, X, podcasts where they didn't really look like a runner,
Hmm.
but they really got into running. And I think the biggest example is probably David
Yeah.
Goggins. It's like here you have this guy who's former military and just like has a really interesting story, you know, reversed his life trajectory with fitness and really like leveraged the running side of that for quite some time. So you'd have people who are like, whether they were like really out of shape and needed to start exercising like David was in his early days, or if they were just built more like someone you would expect to see kind of under the squat rack at the
Hmm.
gym, they said, "Hey, oh, well, if Goggins can run 240 miles, why can't I just go out and do like the local
Right.
5K or go around the block a few times?" So I think it was like some of it was just like seeing people that resembled you a little bit more doing an activity you otherwise would have been like, well, that's not me. Uh, and then it's like one of those things where it's kind of like you were saying before, where running has a history of being punishment. So you sort of had to get over this like this entry curve of like it does kind of suck in the beginning as you're
Yes.
like getting into it for the first time. But then you if you can make it to like 4 weeks and you start kind of seeing some of that progress and you start getting kind of that like type 2 fun of like, "Oh, you know what? I feel better the rest of the day when I go out and run for 60 minutes in the morning." Or like I feel way better about like how I'm progressing in other areas when I can see the improvements happening there. And then they're kind of hooked and it's almost like I like to call it kind of like the reverse where in the beginning you look forward to the day off because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I can get back to what I was doing before. I don't have to do this run to the point where now you take a rest day and that's the thing that feels
Yeah.
awkward. You're like, oh, I want to go out for a run, but I'm going to take a rest day because I know it's going to be better for my longevity in the sport and something like
I'm
that.
smiling because like
Uh,
this is exactly my story right now. You know, after
yeah.
I've been, you know, I did a lot of ultras and a lot of running marathons and all that between '08 and 14, but I've really done very little endurance running since then. And to your point, it took me and I'm older now, I'm 44. It took me about 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks to build a base where I was able to go out for a 5, 6 mile run and then not be completely, gassed. You know what I mean? Like, it really has been awesome now. I'm in that phase now where I love it. I look forward to the run, even on the hot days, and I feel so good the rest of the day. But I remember that I remember getting into running for the first time that it takes time to build that base. But I forgot now just how long it takes to build the base when you haven't had it for a long period of time. And it's just been so cool. And then your other point is so spot on. And we talk about this at RWB a lot, but hiking, running, rucking, those things right there, like in walking, those four things right there, I call them the ankle express, right? Like you're getting there on your own 2 feet. And when you do that, it is accessible. You can do it almost anywhere. It costs very little, and it's so powerful to be able to not have to, like, during a COVID scenario, you don't need the gym. You don't need like the yoga studio. You don't need, the CrossFit box. You just need your sneakers and get outdoors. And golf saw a similar sort of boom during COVID. And I never even connected those dots that you just did, that, really COVID in many ways was, hey, get outdoors, you can go do it. And that, I think, got a lot of people hooked on it. So,
Mhm. Yeah, we saw like a surge of like the kind of 1v1 or you versus you type of pursuits where yeah, you could do it on your own. You didn't have to rely on another person or another group to be able to do it. And yeah, it was so I think we're still seeing kind of an uptick in just in that because now I think people we're far enough removed from the lockdown stages of the pandemic or the closure stages that you get people who've now been doing it for a couple of years and they're all in, so they're sort of experiencing like different stages of their running journey. or different stages of like what they're going to do with running. Cause there's just a limitless number of things you can do
Yeah.
between like your local 5K or the Moab 240.
That's right. It's awesome.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, the other thing that I think is kind of interesting too is just like the component of Team RWB. There was like this emphasis on it's one thing to kind of tell you, hey, you got to keep up your fitness and stay on top of that. That's an important component in life. And then tell people like there's a directive here. But there's another part to just like adding the community aspect of it, which kind of adds that value of, oh, I'm here for more than just one
Yep.
reason. So, like, when Team RWB started, how much of that was about just kind of getting people connected to not even just other service members in that same pursuit, but like people who are kind of already in the community, already doing running, already doing CrossFit and all these other activities, so that they had kind of a home for themselves to get integrated
Huge.
into?
Yeah, big part of it. When I was in grad school, when starting Team Red, White, and Blue, the positive psychology movement was beginning to really gain steam. And the number one finding in the research of positive psychology is that the number one driver of life satisfaction is the quality of our relationships with our family, friends, teammates, coworkers, roommates, basically who we do life with. And if we have good relationships with those people, we're going to be happy. Doesn't mean that money and status and what you accomplish doesn't mean anything. It's just we way overassess how much we think those things will make us happy. And we underassess how important the relationships in our lives are to our overall happiness and well-being. And so knowing that research, that was a big part of what we poured into Team Red, White, and Blue. This idea that, hey, veterans are going to leave the military, move back to either their hometown or a new town or whatever it is, like either life will have changed a lot in their hometown, they will have changed a lot, or they're moving to a new town, and helping them to assimilate, or to the buzzword back then was reintegrate into a community, was a huge deal. And there was a lot of writing about it, a lot of people like telling stories about it. So that's why we existed, really. Yes, was the physical activity part to drive the demons away from the mental health side with PTSD. But a big part of it was also to help them to connect with and build relationships with fellow veterans. And as you may remember, 30% of our members are not veterans. They're military family members or just good old Americans who want to support and be a handout to help a veteran when they're having a bad day, to pull them out of a dark place, or to have a conversation when they're going through it and they're in a funk. And so all of that coming together was really the idea of to be a community. And so we at Team RDB, we call it, a community of communities. We have this national community signified by wearing the red, white, and blue eagle with a star as a body that we have. That's, our logo that's been in lots of different places, from the International Space Station to the White House to the Super Bowl, to a question on Jeopardy, like all these things. But really, at the end of the day, it's about the micro community. It's about those smaller groups of relationships that form, most of them by geography, but sometimes across geography. Sometimes when we bring veterans together for a trail running camp that I think you were a coach at down in Texas, or we bring them together for a specific event, or the Old Glory Relay for a day. They come from different parts of the state or different parts of the country, and they still have an identity that they forge together around, hey, I'm a part of this community. We've got probably 15 couples married, right, because of Team Red, White, and Blue, that I know of. It might be 3 times more, than that, or 4 times more. So the idea of relationships forming, under that umbrella of community is a big part of the psychological underpinning of who we are and why we do what we do. Yes, to the physical activity, but the purpose of the physical activity is ultimately to drive better health, physical, mental, emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because like Nicole and I, we knew who each other were before the Team RWE camp, but that's where we met and stayed
Yeah.
connected
Yeah.
afterwards, and then ended up dating and getting married. So you can add one more group to that
Yeah.
number.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And we're not even service members; we were just
Yeah.
counselors. So it just goes to show you the power of kind of community when you get people kind of together and you set it up right. So it's not like, it would have probably been different had we gone there and it would have just been like, kind of a forced
Hmm.
like activity. Then you maybe like disassociate with the people
Yeah.
involved with it because it's like, I don't want to do that
Right.
again. But the way those camps were set up, there was just so much kind of fun, excitement, and learning, and and a lot of running too. So
Yeah.
it's like, how do we just combine all the valuable things that come from that community to show people, connect people, and then send them back with those resources. Uh, I thought that was like a really cool experience being able to help out with those
Oh,
camps.
it was, yeah, that was amazing. And, one of the mistakes we made in the organization building was that, after a while we sort of consolidated them and made them all national camps. And then it became too cumbersome to manage, and so, looking back at like, those are some of the things we're trying to get back to. We call them Eagle expeditions now, but we've really tried to get out into nature, hiking and running, and doing more of that in these small groups of like 15 to 20 veterans together. Because as you said, like, that's where the relationships are forged, is in those smaller groups and in those conversations. But yeah, it's really cool to see what happens, especially in the world today, as it's gotten more and more digital, more virtual, more augmented reality, all the things of technology. I made this post like recently, but like, it's pretty clear to me, we don't need more technology. We need more leaders, and we need more community, and I really think that, Team RWB is an example of, what does a authentic community look like? But we're still continuing to have to push people coming out of COVID to remind them of how important like the in-person experience in life is. Because a lot of people have gone to this digital virtual mentality, right? That is, I can do almost everything virtually, whether it's board meetings or whether it's grocery shopping or whatever. And some things I think are totally fine to do remotely or to do virtually. But at the end of the day, relationships are forged and built when you come together in person, at a rate that you can't even
Mhm.
compare it to when you're trying to do that like via a computer or some sort of digital chat room. So
Yeah. Yeah, and we all learned that during the pandemic, I think, of just like where the threshold was between just kind of being a little bit of a hermit for a while
mhm.
versus like how important some of those, just like, you almost took it for granted. It was like you'd get this internal emotional benefit from engaging with someone in real
Yep.
life, and you just kind of had that built into your day to a degree where you didn't really have to think about it too much, or at least
Yeah.
I did. And then it's like all of a sudden now you have a scenario where, oh, okay, well, I could go days, if not weeks, without seeing someone other than Nicole. But had I been single, it could have just been
Yeah.
myself. And then you start to notice, like, you know what, like, I don't feel
Yeah.
great. Like, something's missing. Something, I'm losing motivation in certain things. And then you go out and you do something social, and it would just be like you got like total recharge,
Yes.
and you're like, oh, okay, so there's there's something there about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learned it over and over again, during that process of of COVID. But then it's also something that I think we have to continue reinforcing, because we built a lot of habits as humans during that time period, to think that like we can sort of function mostly digitally, right, or mostly remotely. And there's a lot of benefits to that. We know that there's a lot of things that you actually can do virtually, and it's fine. But not forgetting that the power of the in-person experience, like we had out at Camp Eagle with that trail running camp, or when you're out there, like, on a trail with other people and seeing it, other people, and interacting with them. Even if you're a big introvert, you still draw some energy off of that experience, and seeing other humans saying hi to you, or looking at, in your case, looking at you as you're flying by them, but like, that stuff is, yeah, that's part of the experience to be human. And I think we have to keep fighting to not lose that.
Mhm. Yeah. How hard was that in the early stages? Because now you have chapters like all over the place, it seems. So I think like if someone hears about Team RWB and they're like, I'd like to get involved
Hmm.
with that, they can probably find something not too far away in a lot of cases.
Yep.
But in the early days before you had that structure set up, what was sort of the like what was the first thing that you would do to try to connect people at a big enough scale to feel like it was enough to kind of keep moving
Yeah, that
forward?
was a big challenge we had in the early days. We never envisioned ourselves being a chapter organization. Honestly, the initial concept was, hey, let's create an organization that people can join. They can get a shirt and be a part of this team, and then they can fundraise money to support wounded veterans. That was 1.0 of the organization in March and April and May of 2010. But it wasn't that too long after we started hearing from veterans and hearing from other people that, hey, I'm a wounded veteran, and I prefer not to like be singled out as a wounded veteran. I just want to be like a veteran, you know? And a lot of times veterans who needed help were those that were not visibly wounded. They were struggling with the invisible wounds of war, with PTSD, and they necessarily did not want to be recognized as being struggling, because they were like, well, my buddy over here lost his leg and he's, you know, able to keep it together. And so there was a lot of this social comparison happening, you know, within the veteran community. But when it started, it was very run and gun. Like, we just sort of said, hey, if you can get together with other people, you know, in Phoenix, that we had Bill Egan, who had his son had lost a leg. He was a Marine. He lost a leg in an IED attack. You know, so we had various people standing up to lead our chapters, but it was very much the Wild West. You know, there was minimal structure. It was, hey, we're meeting here, you know, at the park in Tempe where they do the Ironman course or whatever, and we're gonna like meet there at 6 o'clock on Friday night, and let's go for a run, then go get a drink. You know, I mean, it was that ad hoc to make it happen, and we knew that wasn't sustainable. It also wasn't very predictable. So over time, that's where we started to build in the structure, and we said, hey, we have to have a volunteer leadership structure at the ground of all these chapters. And now we're about 160 chapters across America. At the high watermark, we were over 200 when there was so much emphasis and focus on supporting veterans. The reality, Zach, I mean, is that you know, we're further and further away from 9/11. We're further and further away from Iraq and Afghanistan, and the number of, you know, people who feel to be called to be a part of the veteran reintegration, the veteran health and wellness mission, is lower than what it was in 2013, 2016, even all the way up to probably to 2018. And that's just a natural ebb and flow of life. And so at Team RWB, we've had to adjust and say, hey, we don't have as many chapters as we used to. We need to continue to make sure that veterans, wherever they're located, know that they have a home, they have a community that they belong to in Team Red, White, and Blue. We want them to get together in person wherever possible. But if they can't, we want to make sure that we've got programming to support them, because they might live an hour and a half from a chapter, and they're not going to get in their car and drive an hour and a half to go do a 45-minute run or workout. So that continues to be a part of our evolution as an organization, is how do we keep building this team, the national community, and then operationalizing as many local engagements as possible where people come together to break a sweat together, because we know that's where the real power and the real transformation happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I remember some of those early camps where I think the last one that I was at, there was well over 100 participants there. It might have been even a couple hundred. And it was just kind of a cool vibe, because it was like you had like people that could just sign up, like you said, like civilians, and kind of join. And I mean, we had plenty of counselors there, so like you could learn something whether you were if you're just interested in running. I thought that was just such a great way to do it too, because you're sort of like, not only are you showing the veterans that, okay, this is something I can engage in, this community is great, I'm going to find a spot back home that, you know, I can get some runs in with other people. But then you're also like showing other people just, oh, there's this group of people out here who are very capable of participating in this community, but they may feel like there's some sort of roadblock there. So maybe I should like actively reach out. Maybe I should volunteer at my local chapter and help out and kind of start keeping the momentum going.
That's exactly right. And that was the greatest thing about those camps, is that people got shot out of there like out of a cannon, you know, and they went back to their local community and started to do whatever they could to put on events, to take the knowledge that they just gained at that triathlon camp or at that trail running camp or the CrossFit camp to then help other veterans. And what's really cool is that we're kind of coming full circle on that at Team Red, White, and Blue. We've just stood up a scholarship fund where we're looking now to certify veterans in running, in nutrition, sleep, certified personal trainers, and yoga, CrossFit, all these different disciplines within the fitness realm and the health and wellness realm. We're looking to certify more and more veterans so that they can give back, that they can pay it forward in a way to help other veterans be healthier. Because as you know, like, you have to actively, in the world today, in our country, whether it's what you're eating, what you're drinking, your exercise, like how you spend your time consuming things through a screen, like you have to actively work to be healthy. It's not just like it's kind of easy to be healthy because like there's junk food temptations at every corner,
Yeah.
right? That didn't used to be there. All that stuff. So like we're really working with the veteran community to help them understand. Again, caffeine in moderation, alcohol in moderation, sleep is important. How you think about adversity is important. How you move your body, critical. All these tenets and principles of health and wellness that we all might kind of get them, but a lot of people honestly are just very busy going through the grind of the day to day. And they're like, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to be tired. I'm going to slam, a bunch of caffeine, right? I'm going to eat some junk food because it's the most quickly accessible, right? When the day's all over, right? I am going to try to get to bed, but before I do that, I'm coping with some booze because I've had a long, stressful day, and that's a vicious cycle that a lot of veterans are in that's hard to break free from. And as better than I do, but like the next day, if you've had even a couple of drinks the night before and you're waking up early the next morning to go run or train, like it ain't worth it. And so you start to say, all right, I'm starting to sacrifice some of these other things because I'm putting in too much work on my fitness to like flush it down the drain, And so these are all the things that we're trying to integrate into our programs to really build a health and wellness community for veterans.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think just for my own my own kind of development with running, I always think about this. It's like when I went to college, I was on the cross country and track team, but I think about like the decisions that I made that I would not have made had I not been on the
Yeah,
track and cross country teams, and they generally would have skewed towards bad versus
totally.
good, most likely. Like, or there's been a lot more available anyway, I guess is probably the way to say it. But like you said, when you have that motivation of, oh, well, we have a workout on Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, and I got to feel good for that, or we got a race on Saturday morning, and I want to really see what I can do there. It just takes so many bad decisions off the
Yep.
table because you're not going to engage with them because you know that they're going to negatively impact the primary thing. So it's just one of those things where like not only is it good to do, it's also kind of it just provides a framework to build off of for decision making that is going to be more productive because you kind of see firsthand how those things impact you.
Absolutely.
It's really
Yeah, and I
interesting.
keep saying this over and over again to again veterans within Team RWB. But as you get older, if you don't get smarter with your habits and better, life gets harder and harder, right? If you need caffeine to get through your day. If you're drinking too much, if you're eating like junk food all the time, if you're not exercising, all those things. Like when you're young, you're in your 20s, like you can kind of roll with the punches. You know what I mean? Like most people can.
Yeah, yeah,
You start getting into like your late 30s, 40s, and I'm guessing as I keep getting older, like you cannot, right? You got to get serious about that stuff. Otherwise, your mood and your energy level of what you have the energy to go accomplish or do is greatly affected, right? By those factors of what you eat and how you hydrate and how you sleep or how poorly you sleep, and then your exercise or not. And as you know, these things are all beautiful when they work together. You limit your alcohol intake, you sleep better, you exercise better, so therefore you sleep better. That you don't need the alcohol as a coping mechanism like nearly as much. Like it's all a beautiful thing when it comes together. And again, we're really working, yes, we're still a community and that's the big focus, but we are also really driving towards educating and inspiring veterans to live a healthier life. Because you do build a lot of habits when you're in the military. There's a bit of a drinking culture there. You have to exercise. That goes away. And so if you retain the bad habits of tons of caffeine and drinking, but then you lose the habit of exercise, right, which is what a lot of veterans do, that's where the problems emerge. And so we are just driving them to really consider like how much better their life can be if they make these decisions around what they eat, what they drink, how they move, how they sleep, in a way that will make them better.
yeah, yeah. I mean, when you say it like that, it's just kind of like a reminder of how convenient all the short term fixes that oftentimes have long term consequences are to be able to continue to make, and how convenient they are to be able to do versus the ones that are going to be like long-term positives, things you kind of have to be like consistent with over long periods of time, and how easy it is just to like kind of stop doing those. So it's like the good things are hard, the bad things are easy.
Yep.
So you get a
Totally.
combination of both those happening at the same time, and it's just, things can spiral quickly.
100%. That is exactly correct.
So in the spirit of doing epic
Yeah.
stuff or focusing on positives, You've got a really interesting project coming up, which is one of the catalysts for this podcast episode. Actually, you have or you're putting together, I guess, a group of men and women to make a push across the country in relay fashion. You want to tell us a little bit about kind
Yeah,
of what you're thinking about with that?
absolutely. Smiling ear to ear, because this is just something that I just get so excited about. So a little bit of background. So since 2014, we've been doing something called the Old Glory Relay, where we work to move the flag either by bike or by foot, anywhere between 50 and 70 miles a day. And we've moved it all kinds of different routes, right? From San Francisco to DC, from Seattle to Tampa. We've moved it from Boston to San Diego, right? Like just all these different routes, east and west across the country. And it's been awesome. But we also realize that a lot of our members, are now older. They're in their 40s. They may not be able to get off time from work to be able to dedicate a full day to this. And so we really looked at sort of innovating, at least for the short term, on what that Old Glory Relay should look like. And so we've evolved that into the Old Glory Ultra Relay. And so first of its kind. So we're setting the record no matter what, because as far as I can see, no one's done this yet. But we are going to relay an American flag from San Diego, big military town, of course, home of the Navy SEALs and a bunch of Marines, and we're going to bring it through the South, and we're going to kind of come on up. I think it's Dallas is where the closest we would come to Austin, but we're going to be there, and then we'll work our way up through Tennessee, probably into Carolina, and we're finishing in DC, either at Walter Reed Memorial Hospital or Congress or the White House. We don't know. We're going to finish somewhere in DC. But really, really excited about this. It's going to be 3,000 miles, just about. We're aiming to do it in 16 days or less, which means about 200 miles a day, running the flag around the clock. So we're assembling a team of, think about this like a special forces team in the military, Green Berets. If you remember back to the show, the A-Team, with Mr. T and Murdoch, right? With that, the music, like the special forces team is 12. And so we're going to have a team of either 2 or 3 women and 9 or 10 guys, all of them veterans. So no one on active duty, right? Everyone who has been in the military and is now out, and they're going to form this team, and they're going to move this American flag around the clock, and it's not going to stop. One of the mottos is like, don't let the flag hit the pole, right? Like we just want it to be moving the whole time, right? And blowing in the wind. And so we've got some big ambitious plans for how we're going to accomplish this. It's going to be in May, so it's going to start May 1st, finish on May 16th or 17th, 15th, 16th, or 17th, depending on how it all goes, which is Military Appreciation Month. It's going to finish ideally on Armed Forces Day, right? 9 days later is Memorial Day, so it's a big time when the country's thinking about the military and military service, and so it's going to be a really epic experience where, that means on average, people are going to run about 2 hours a day. We need them to be holding an aggregate pace of about 7:30 per mile, I believe, if my math is correct. So it's not like right, sub 6s, and holding that pace. But, you got to be good enough to be able to do that day after day after day while not getting great recovery and, hopefully getting good nutrition and getting as much recovery as you can, but not excellent sleep. And, each person's going to be on the clock for a total of about 120 minutes per day for 15, 16, 17 days in a row. And so it's pretty awesome to think of how this is going to inspire and motivate the veteran community and also give us this megaphone and amplify our message around how important physical activity is to mental, physical, and emotional health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. How did you, or maybe it's not firm yet, but how did you come up with kind of like the target duration that someone will carry the flag for? Is that kind of a more loosely established?
Yeah, it was pretty, it was the idea of like, we wanted to go coast to coast, and I think that San Diego is the biggest military city in California. And so that was part of it. And finishing, in DC, where there's so much of, the VA headquarters is there. Walter Reed Memorial Hospital is there. So much is going on there. And so we kind of looked at that as a general route, and then looking to the miles, it kind of sounds cool to be able to say, hey, we're going 3,000 miles, which means that, again, a little over 200 miles per day. So it kind of keeps the math breakdown pretty clean. But yeah, we really wanted to just say, hey, we want to set a mark and say, like, this is what a team of 12 veterans did working together. And, you know, there's some potential ideas for the future. I mean, we have to see how it goes and how much energy is behind it. But we'd love to be able to see this be something that, like, you know, the Army, the National Guard, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, that they maybe put together a team in the future. And it's almost like, you know,
Yeah.
think about, like, you know, the ways to do that, like the Speed Project, right? Like I've been tracking that for a little bit, but hey, come up with your own route. Your job is to get from point A to point B. Choose your poison, right? Do you want to go through the windy plains, you know, of Kansas, or do you want to go through? But that means you got to go through the elevation of Santa Fe, or do you want to stay further to the south? You know, there's I think some pretty cool things that could come of it. But ultimately, like, to drive the message, you know, to the American people, to include younger people who are thinking about military service, that they, like, look what these guys are doing, like, after they've worn the uniform. Because a lot of the focus, honestly, Zach, around people in the veteran community is like where they're damaged, or where they're, you know, battling PTSD, or they've got physical pain. And yes, that's part of it. Sometimes people get hurt, and sometimes people struggle when they leave the military. But a lot of veterans, they're able to sort of alchemize that pain, right, into a better second chapter of their life. And that's a lot of us. And I think it's important to tell that story as well, not just for younger kids in America to think that, hey, I can go join the military one day, but also, you know, fellow veterans who are looking for some inspiration to get going, to get off the couch, to get moving again, to reestablish that fitness level and fitness routine that they had in their lives. So we got a lot of reasons for doing this, and they all involve inspiration to, you know, the American people.
Hey folks, just a quick reminder that this podcast sponsors include S Fuels. They have a 15% offer for you. Element Electrolytes, they have a free sample pack offer for you. John G Apparel has 10% off, and Delta G Ketones has a 20% off and free consultation offer for you. Links and details can be found in the show notes and the episode landing page. You can also check out a full description of how I use all of these products in my own training and racing at the end of this podcast episode.
Yeah, it's actually interesting too to think about, just if someone is looking at, like, let's put someone in the position you were at one point where you're deciding whether you want to go into the military or not. There is the decision to go with that career, but then there's what's on the back end of
Right.
that? And if what's on the back end of that, if the general thought is it's a bad second half of your
Right.
life, you're not just thinking about, like, the experience in and of itself, you're thinking of, like, you know, that next set. So when you have a scenario like you described, where the average person's kind of connection to the post-military lifestyle is of, like, doing really cool stuff like
Yeah.
this, I imagine that helps with just kind of recruitment and just the general kind of, like, feel of, like, this is a career path that's got opportunities available to it outside of just what I'll be doing when I'm serving.
Absolutely. And to be super clear on that, when you look at our country right now, or the past 3-4 years, you know, there is a recruiting shortfall, bumping up against crisis. You know, the Marines are barely making their numbers, and the other Air Force, Army, Navy, our Coast Guard, they're all falling considerably short. So a lot of young people are not considering military service as something that they want to do or that they would do. And that is a problem for the future of our country. That is a problem for our national security. And so part of this is, we want to inspire, you know, people out there. And I saw this firsthand, you know, just earlier this year. You're probably tracking a Navy 03 named Paul Johnson, who did the Transcon run from Los Angeles to New York City. And I was out there in Effingham, Illinois. Never thought I'd go to Effingham, Illinois, but there I was, you know, on a cold day in April. And my son and I ran with him through this town. And, like, the word got out that, hey, this guy's running across the country and he's coming through our town. And you had, like, it was almost like Forrest Gump, right? Where you saw, like, at one point there was like 15 or 20, you know, middle school to high school age kids. There was a dad who came out with his, like, 10-year-old son. My son is 13 at the time. And he came out and ran 10 miles. He never even came close to running 10 miles, you know, in his life. And he's out there doing 10 miles, and he still is so proud of himself for that. But you saw this younger generation, like, being inspired by this. And that's not the driver of why we're doing this. We're doing this to really send this strategic message about the power of when we come together and we do hard things, right? That the veteran community is capable of that. But for sure, we do want to highlight, to that younger generation who I think is very much in search of inspiration, that we're going to give it to them, right? And they're going to see this flag moving all the way across the country at 7 to 7.5 minutes per mile all the way through the night. They're going to see the video of that flag moving all the way across the country, and our hope is that it can really inspire them to consider military service, if that's something that they think they might be a good fit for. So we're looking forward to that element too.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I'm curious about kind of the logistics of this. I think like so you got 12 people and they're doing 2-hour shifts. Is there any sort of shuffling that you'll do throughout? So like, because someone's going to draw the
Yeah.
straw that has the 2 a.m. to
Yeah.
4 a.m.
Yeah.
shift.
And someone's going to draw in the hotter part, because we're doing it in May. Someone's going to draw that like,
That's true.
1 p.m. to 3 p.m. run in Texas, Yeah, for sure. This is where part of this is where we're thinking in terms of like, a big part of this will be a crew chief, someone who can kind of manage the egos, right? Especially when people are getting tired and getting frustrated, and that element for sure. So I don't think it'll be, hey, you've got 2 to 4 every day, no matter what, right? Though there's probably going to have to be some give and take. I'm certainly no expert on this. And honestly, that's kind of the fun, is that no one on our team, is an expert. So we're leaning on people like you to, kind of, I think, help us think through this. But we are really excited for the chance that this is not a guarantee, right? Like you're thinking about Michael Easter in his book, The Comfort Crisis, right? The Misogi is like, you have to have a 50-50 chance at succeeding for it to be a Misogi. It can't be this guaranteed thing. We guarantee we're going to get there, right? The question is going to be, are we going to get there in that 15 or 16 days that we're saying? I don't know, right? But like we're confident and optimistic that with the right plan, the right nutrition, the right hydration, the right stretching, all those things coming together, that we can give ourselves the chance to be able to do that, in a way that will allow us to hit that target goal. But for sure, like we've got a lot to learn, and hopefully a little bit of trial and error between now and then to figure out how the team will work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would be interesting would be, because with 12 people, the easy framework just to unpack would just be 2 hours, and you're kind of on that 2-hour stretch, and that's going to account for the 24-hour cycle. What you could do is you could try to figure out like, well, what are the hardest parts to do? Like, which are the least desirable sections or times of day? So maybe that is like the heat of the day, and then those like late hours at night, and just make those segments like a little shorter. So maybe make them like 90 minutes, so that as you move through, people get phased in and out of it versus being stuck on it the entire time.
I like it.
So then at some point you're doing the overnight shift, and then but at some point you get the great, like, oh, it's 8 a.m. I've woke up, I've had my coffee, I'm ready to go.
So this is it. This is what I'm looking forward to. The coaching and here is invaluable, because we're gonna have to think through all of that, because there's just a lot of factors to consider, as right? It's the sleep, it's the hills, the heat, the late nights, the nutrition, all those things come into play. And we're gonna have to get people like you who are really smart about this stuff to give us some guidance and direction for sure.
Cool. No, I think it'll be fun. It's gonna be really cool to see it all come together, and then eventually see what you got. So are you gonna just have like a bunch of RVs following the group? Is that how that?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Works
So so we're working. One of our big sponsors over the past couple of years has been BMW, and so they provided during Glory Relay, they provided our vehicle, like a bigger vehicle, like an SUV. So we're working with them to figure out, getting some vehicles donated, right, to help with like some of it. But for sure, we're going to need several RVs, where we'll be places to sleep and eat and all that. And we're looking for partners across all of it, right? We're looking, for everything from tracking to caffeine to biometrics to food to you name it, like to help us think through what's the optimal use of their product to help us. Because, we also want to tell the story here with this. It's not just about doing this, like, in a vacuum. We want to talk about whether it's, again, Fitbit or Oura Ring or whatever the biometric device will be, to be able to show like, hey, this is how the heart rates affect when you do that midday shift in the sun. And this is their sleep scores after a rough stretch or after a good stretch. So we want to use this also to help educate our community about these things that are health and wellness related, they might typically not care about as much. Like, hey, yeah, I don't care about sleep scores, but now they want to see the sleep scores after someone's been on, on the road for 8 or 9 days and putting in, these, 2-hour runs or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of different inputs there that I think would make sense. And yeah, is there any like interest or thought into having like a film crew coming along to document a lot of that?
Yes, for sure. So we've got multiple different like sort of irons in the fire there, but absolutely, I don't know that we need to have like that we'll be able to afford a full crew, kind of like, or even a team of like 3, for the whole thing. But we definitely want to get a team there for parts of it, and we want to have at least somebody there taking pictures and or video the whole way through. So we actually got a new member to our team, lives in Texas, and we feel this is right in his wheelhouse. So, Tim K is Army veteran, and this is, part of what he has done in the past. So we definitely want to make sure that we're telling the story and telling it as close to real time as possible, so that people are following it and they're waiting for the updated story on Instagram. They're waiting for the updated post to see, hey, where are they at today? Who crushed their leg? Who did not? How's the weather going? Is there a tornado warning or is there hail? I mean, we're running through, in May, there's some dicey places there. And just a quick story, Zach, you remember, Dave James, right? Like, a big ultra marathon runner.
Yeah.
Dave was in the very first Old Glory relay in 2014. Dave stayed with the flag almost the whole way, I think like 45 or 50 of the 60 days. And he was there as they went through Nevada, and they started to climb into a hill, and it was like apparently a lightning storm like no other, right? And here he is running with the American flag with a medal, right? In the flag.
Oh, no.
But we were told we should never tell these stories because, like, oh man, like, but it's just too good to not tell. And he's like, we are not putting the flag in the van, like, and because some people were like, hey man, we don't want to get someone killed here. He's like, we were going to keep moving it. And so eventually, like, he came in after getting yelled at by one of the teammates of like, dude, your life is worth more than like, holding on to the flag in a lightning storm. So he came in and he waited, but like, I mean, he was sometimes would put in 20, 25 miles in a day because we didn't have enough runners, to do it. And it was just an unbelievable story. So we're looking for some epic stories. We don't want the weather to be perfect. We want there to be, storms, and we want there to be adversity, but capturing all that on film, is going to be a big part of, I think, what captures the American people's attention and their hearts, with what this team is going to do.
Yeah, no doubt. I think like having some of that content will be really cool for people following along, and then and hopefully it will help get some sponsors knowing that they'll get a little bit of I mean, there's no way around them getting involved with when you have all sorts of content like that.
Right.
So, really cool. So what is the general, you said May is when you're starting?
Yeah,
Early May?
I believe it's May 1st. Yep, in San Diego.
Okay,
So.
perfect. And then so the in terms of getting the team put together, where are you all at with that? Have you selected a team? Is it partly put together?
Yeah,
Are you still
partly. Yeah, partly put
searching?
together. So anyone out there listening, right, who's a Zach Bitter fan and like, listen to him for all these things, who either is a veteran or knows a veteran, please let them know about it. Please drop a line and see, comment for, more information. We'll jump all over it. We are trying to put together this like, a very, diverse team from like different branches and services. And, it's not gonna be all former special forces, guys, right? We want to come together and really kind of reflect the diversity of the military population, right? We also want to make sure that, we have people who are able to do this, right? Because if you can want to do this all day long, but if you're only going to be able to get to 830 miles, then hey, we'd love to have you maybe be a crew member, right? Or maybe be someone on the logistics side. But the team of 12 is going to need to be able to be physically fit enough to accomplish this daunting task. But the bottom line is we still have applications are still open. We've had, I think, around 50 or so people apply right now. And so we're continuing to take in applications. Some of them are just absolutely amazing stories. People who were wounded in combat and people who have done amazing things. And some are never been to combat at all, right? They were in the military at a very different time, and they didn't ever go to Iraq or Afghanistan. So to the extent that someone out there may know someone who would be interested, we'd love to talk with them. And we still have some time before we fill out the team.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be an amazing experience. I'd sign up if
Yeah.
I had the
Yeah.
service requirement.
Yeah, dude, you would definitely lower you would change that average from 730 to like everyone else could probably add together and go like 750, so your time. Well, we don't need people as fast as you, but we need them, to be fast enough and be willing to put in the train up to be healthy enough. Because as you know, right, it's also you can be healthy on day 1 through 4, but it's really can you stay healthy,
Mhm.
as the you get into the deep fight, all that kind of stuff. And so we need people who are deeply committed, to the train up to make sure that they are ready to be able to, put in the work so that they're ready for game day and really game weeks.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Is there gonna be, like, is it just 12, and then if there's any sort of attrition, you're going with a shorter crew, or is
That's
there,
that's
can you take
that's
someone
been
off
the
the bench, so to
debate.
speak?
That's been up for debate on the staff as we think through this. But Mike Sullivan has been pretty big on, hey, no, this is the team 12. There's no subbing in like somebody else. That there'll be an alternate if someone gets hurt or something happens like in their personal life where they have to drop at the last minute. But once the team shoves the ship off the shore on May 1st,
It's
that's
12.
those are the 12 ladies and gentlemen who are working. And if someone gets hurt or has to drop or has to alter their mileage, that someone else is going to have to cover down on that and make it up. We might be open to it if there's like a family emergency or something like that someone has to leave, right? That we could maybe then justify putting in like the alternate. But yeah, we don't want to go to, someone's hurt on day 5, so we're going to sub them in, with the
Right.
alternate. We want to keep this really these 12 people pure, and that's the intent right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're jumping in midway, you don't have that attrition in your legs. What would be you could do is have the alternate has to run 2 hours every day, so if they do get called in, no one can
Yeah,
say, "Hey, but they haven't been."
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That would be yeah,
Make the alternate pace
yeah,
once per
yeah.
day, and then if they get called in, they still got the fatigue in their
That's right.
legs.
Yeah, that's a good point because we want this to be as much as possible. We want this to be again, we're not trying to set a Guinness Book of World Records. I mean, we kind of are, but we don't care if like they actually recognize it. This is really just the idea that we want to be above board on all this stuff as possible, so that people don't have any doubts or concerns. We don't. The last thing we want is like any sort of drama distracting from the incredible mission and the reason why we're doing this. And so we're taking all those precautions on the front end.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's also something we kind of chatted a bit about this the other day, but it'd be fun kind of through the process. We've got about, is it 8 months or so
Yes.
until, or you have
Yeah,
about
8 months. Yeah,
eight months
September
to
1st is
formally
when
get the team?
we're hoping to finalize the team on September 1st, and that'll be exactly 8 months until go time.
Awesome. Yeah. And it would be kind of fun to kind of, for those
Yeah,
willing that are on the team, to kind of come through the podcast and share a bit of their story and kind of what motivated them to do it, how their training's going, and then go over some questions and things about how they're training and everything
absolutely.
like that. I think that would make a fun series of episodes to hear from the team members as a lead up to it. So at least listeners from this podcast can have some information when the project kicks off about some of the participants.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be phenomenal, and a huge honor for us and for them as individuals and us collectively at Team Red, White, and Blue. So that would be wonderful to get at least some of them on to be able to share their story, because we're picking some people who've got some amazing stories, because that's part of it is the storytelling aspect here. And then also why we're doing this is going to be a big part of it. But the combination of storytelling plus the why is a really powerful 1-2 punch.
Yeah. Yeah. So if listeners are able to sign up or know someone that they can refer, is there a spot they should head to check out from application
Yeah, so
standpoint?
a couple things like it'll be on all of our social media platforms out there. You can just go to teamrdb.org, and submit there. But we've got a link as well that we'll put out there. So when you drop this, we'll make sure that we comment with the link for anybody who sees this. But if there's not a link, if you're just listening to the podcast, whatever, just go to teamrwb.org. And you can just drop a note in there saying, hey, I heard about this Old Glory Ultra Relay and I'm interested. So
Awesome. It'll definitely be in the show notes too. So for anyone who's listening and wants to just click through that way, that'll be available. Where can people find you, Mike?
yeah, so I'm on most of the social medias. I guess LinkedIn, Facebook, X and Instagram. So Erwin, so with an E, so Erwin RWB is my handle for both Instagram and X. And so, and then you can just find me, on LinkedIn as well, right? Doing more out there to kind of put out into the world, like what we're doing at Team Red, White, and Blue and the impact we're having on the veteran community. And we're just really grateful, Zach, for the chance to be able to connect with you and talk about all these things and recount some of the glory days stories from, 2011, 12, 13, 14 of Team Red, White, and Blue, but also for amplifying and giving us a voice for this incredible ultra relay that we're putting together. It's going to be, I think, really powerful and deeply inspiring for anyone who follows it and sees what we're doing. So I'm really thankful for you, man.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, and no doubt about it. I think will be plenty of inspiration coming out of this project. And yeah, so if anyone wants to donate or sponsor wants to reach out and see how they can support, I'm guessing they just go to teamrwb.org for that info as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Or just reach out to me directly as well on any of those platforms for sure.
Right on. Well, thanks a bunch, Mike, for taking some time and sharing your story, Team RWB's story, and then this project. I'm really looking forward to it. September can't come quick enough.
Thanks so much, Zach. Really appreciate it, bro.
Take care.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around to hear more about how I use the products that sponsor the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I have updated a few things, so if you follow closely, you may notice some new details here. I have taken a lot of time identifying these brands, and I'm incredibly grateful that they have provided a product that I use routinely and are also interested in supporting my work here at the Human Performance Outliers podcast. So here is how I use them. S-Fuels is a product that follows a principle of right fuel at the right time. For me, this means I can anchor my nutrition in a fat-dominant way, but not neglect the powerful application of carbohydrates when they are needed. Their product lineup maps the low-carbohydrate dietary protocol that I have used for endurance since 2011. Here is how I use some of their product lineup and some of their second-generation products that they've just recently brought to market. First is their Zone 4 and Zone 5 product. I use these for intra-workout and race carbohydrate targets. I will use the Zone 4 in less glycolytic settings that still benefit from some carbohydrate, and Zone 5 for workouts that I prefer, workouts and races where I want to maximize my carb to other fuel source exogenous inputs. In short, I prefer Zone 5 when my carb inputs are at their highest and I want to kind of go straight to that source. Zone 2 is a fat-based powder that uses C8 and C10 MCTs that are combined with L-glutamine. I use this for lower intensity workouts to help promote higher fat oxidation rates without neglecting energy deficits. So in short, if I'm doing something longer and I want to keep carbs out, but I don't want to have a huge calorie deficit, Zone 2 plays a great role there. Revival is a post-workout race protein powder that I can easily add to some yogurt or a low-carb smoothie to quickly jumpstart the recovery process. I will use a product like this most often when I'm completing training sessions and have a lower appetite or desire to eat solid foods right after, but want to get a jumpstart on replacing some of the stuff that I left out there. Primed is my go-to caffeine source for training and racing. It combines green tea extract, L-carnitine, taurine, and B vitamins, which all combine to help support energy production, fat metabolism, and reduce perceived effort. Life Bars are a product that have been one of my favorites on the S-Fuels lineup for some time now, and they are a great combo of healthy fats and protein that I can have prior to a big training session, race, or simply as a snack on heavier training days. Grain-free breakfast cereal is something that I can sub in for just about any time I would have put granola on something when I was a more moderate high-carb person. So this is a good substitute for that. Oftentimes I will put it on top of things like yogurt as a topper or something like that. If you're interested in more details about their product lineup, the science behind it, and everything else, head over to sfuelsgolonger.com for up to 15% off your next order. And stay tuned for some product giveaways and promos over the course of the year. I got introduced to Janji last year and have really enjoyed having some of their products in my running and gym rotation. Janji makes pants, shorts, outerwear, tops, and accessories. Janji apparel is made with durability in mind and is backed by a 5-year run everywhere guarantee. Each design is informed by a different part of the world through collaboration with local artists and in partnership with clean water nonprofits with whom they have contributed over $1 million donated to clean water solutions. Some key features that Janji really focuses on is lightweight, breathable, moisture wicking, odor resistant, thermal regulation, and a super soft and flexible material. Here are the products that I've been using a lot so far this summer. I'm still going with the AFO middle short for very light, breathable training sessions where minimal pockets and extras are not desired. So think a very humid summer training run where I want as little on as I can get away with and feel like it's not getting bogged down with a bunch of sweat. The 5-inch multi-short. So I'll sub this one in for sessions where I do want a bit more storage capacity that is placed in the right areas or the right spots. So think things like where I put my phone, does it sit nicely? Or is there a spot to put my key where it's not flopping around or poking me in an awkward place or things like that? So I really like the 5-inch multi-short for that sort of a training session. A product I'm really excited about, which isn't necessarily a training gear per se, is the Multi-Pass Mini and Sling Bags. These are the newest items I have started using from Janji. The only question for me is how much stuff do I need, which will determine which one of these I will bring with me. The Multi-Pass is a great for just stashing things like your keys, wallets, phones, headphones, or any item you want to have with you, all while keeping your pockets free from clutter. It's got a nice clippable strap that you can put around your waist or over your shoulder. I'll upgrade to the sling bag if I'm bringing a little more stuff and it's just not enough room inside that Multi-Pass Mini. So think things like the size of a water bottle, or if I'm just going to be on a little longer session or heading to the airport or something like that, and I just need more storage, but with that same type of design with the waist and shoulder options and the clippable strap. So those are two of my new favorite options. Check those out. You can head to janji.com and get 10% off any of those items as well as anything else they have on there by using promo code BITTER10 for 10% off. They're also available at REI. I will give one quick plug, although it's not winter or cooler. A couple other items that I have in my rotation when it does get cooler is the Repeat Merino long sleeve, the Rover Merino hoodie, the Trail Tights, and the Atlas multi-pant. I've been using Element electrolytes for quite some time now. Actually, a while back, I had a sweat test and it suggested that I lose 614 milligrams of sodium per liter of fluid loss, meaning if I go out for a run and I sweat to the capacity where I lose a liter of fluid, I'm going to lose 614 milligrams of sodium along with that. So during these hot summer months, it's not uncommon that I will lose over a liter per hour when working out. So I favor adding some electrolytes to my workout fluids and pre-workout drinks in order to account for this. I also find it beneficial if I spend some time in the sauna and lose fluids fast that way. I currently have 3 approaches to using Element products. First is one of their warm beverage options in the morning with my coffee. Sometimes I'll put about half a pack of Element in there. Again, one of their warm beverage options. So usually that's something like chocolate mint, chocolate chai, chocolate raspberry, one of those. A second option is one of their fruity flavors in my water bottles while I'm training. So if I'm out there and I'm going through 16 to 20 ounce bottles of water, I'm going to sprinkle in some of that fruity Element flavors into that in order to account for that 614 milligrams of sodium that I'm going to lose. Third is their newest options, which is their Sparkle product, which is just a 16-ounce carbonated can with the Element electrolyte powder in it already mixed for you. So I've been using these for long runs and before afternoon training sessions in the gym when I know my fluid loss has been high. So I've been doing a lot of long runs lately, and having a can of Sparkle there to kind of sip at in between pit stops in the heat to cool down and rehydrate have been a great new addition to my training lineup. Just a reminder, their core flavors include citrus, watermelon, orange, grapefruit, raspberry, chocolate, mango chili, and chocolate caramel. Some seasonal options include chocolate mint, chocolate chai, and chocolate raspberry. You can go to drinklmnt.com/HPO. Throw in that /HPO and you'll get prompted for a free sample pack with your purchase and help support the Human Performance Outliers podcast along the way. The reason I chose Delta G over other exogenous ketone supplements is they have the formula and the dosage that is supported by the research we have to date. They have the DARPA grant to design for special forces, 50 plus research studies and 20 plus ongoing studies. They also have approximately 3 times the amount of ketones in their product than many of their competitors do, which can be critical for hitting the ketone target ranges that suggest potential cognitive and performance benefits. I've been playing around with my protocol a bit during this last training block, so it has changed a bit from what prior protocols you may have heard me mention on here. For like longer training sessions, these are going to be the key points that I'm going to do it. So it's going to be lower intensity but long in duration. I like the long runs. I like these for long runs and even ultra specific long runs, which tend to span beyond, say, 3 hours. And the way I will do this is I will take a bottle of Delta G Performance, that's the blue bottle I have on their website, about an hour into that training session. And then if that session goes beyond 3 hours, I will take a second one. If it doesn't, I will still take a second one post long run as a way to kind of kickstart things for whatever's coming up next. If you're interested in hearing more about it, I did record an episode with Brian McMahon. It's episode 351, Exogenous Ketones and Performance. And if you're also interested in checking more out about the product and signing up for a free consultation to find out how it would maybe fit your lifestyle, you can head to deltagketones.com. Feel free to throw in a promo code BITTER20 for 20% off your purchase of Delta G Ketones. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.